The Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić announced that he is going to resign, quote, within weeks, giving the justification that he needs to resolve political instability in the country. This kind of mass resignation is a common tactic.
On 15th of March 2025, there was like a peaceful, quiet, broad demonstration and protest happening in Belgrade, which was interrupted by a sudden wave of noise. There were several thousand testimonies collected by the civil society in the country. The prosecutor's office said that they will go after these people. Welcome back, listeners. This is Talk Eastern Europe, a news roundup. Each week we are trying to look at the news and see what we can highlight for you. I'm Nina Pániková. I'm one of the co-hosts of the podcast, and I'm here with Alexandra Karppi, another co-host of the podcast. Hi, Alexandra. How have you been?
Hi, Nina. Very good. Back in the UK after some travels, which I'll get into probably at the end for our patrons. But yeah, doing well. And actually, before we dive into the news, I want to share some exciting news for the podcast, which is that Adam and I actually are going to be traveling to Sofia next week to cover a really amazing conference that's being hosted by the European Economic and Social Committee. It's their 2026 Connecting EU seminar. So we'll be there at the beginning of the week. There'll be a lot of coverage, both short form and a long form interview that I won't spoil yet, but the broader topic of the conference is on defending democracy, restoring European democracy, and in general, the power of civil society and the protection of European values. So very important conference, and it was organized not only with the EESC, but also in partnership with the Economic and Social Council of the Republic of Bulgaria. So amazing opportunity. You'll be hearing more about it in the coming weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Exciting. And we are, of course, looking forward to seeing as well some extra footage that you can take for us when you're traveling in Bulgaria, maybe for our patrons. And this is just also another reminder that we are patron-supported podcast. If you want to support what we do, go to patreon.com/TalkEasternEurope. And just to finish off with the announcements quickly, if you also like our analysis, what we do, you can also subscribe to Brief Eastern Europe at briefeasterneurope.eu, which is a newsletter of the new Eastern Europe magazine. And yeah, it's sharp, very concise, and very useful, I would say, every beginning of the year, of the week. to understand what's happening in the region.
Definitely more concise than we are, but we're going to try our best to run through a lot of news. Nina, I think we have to start with Serbia if we're going to dive right in. So first, just a couple of days ago, the Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić announced that he's going to resign, quote, within weeks, giving the justification that he needs to resolve political instability in the country, which is a very classic turn of phrase used by the government in light of the protests that have been ongoing, obviously, since the end of 2024 after a fatal canopy collapse that I know we've covered quite a bit. But look, I want to hear your take, and I know there's even more news to cover out of Serbia, but I think just briefly, I'm in agreement with all the experts that this is being reported like it's like a normal thing to be happening in a democracy, but it's really not. This kind of mass, resignation in order to trigger elections when it's sort of most convenient for the ruling party, when they seem to believe, evidently, that they have the support to weather some kind of big change like this and go to early elections is a common tactic. I think I'm going to get the exact stat wrong, but something like the last, 2/3 of elections in Serbia in the last decade have been these extraordinary elections that have been called at these opportune moments. So I don't think it's going to lead to some kind of, revolutionary change in Serbia. I expect the elections to still mainly go in the ruling party's way. But look, let's see. You never know. I think about Hungary earlier this year. You never know what can happen when there's big citizen turnout. And now we have the new student list in the opposition. So this is a completely new political movement. So yeah, let's see what happens, I guess.
Interesting. And I wonder, Alexandra, because when I was in Serbia not so long time ago, and I talked to people, like they were quite excited about the potential that the elections would be, called for. And of course, this is one of the demands of the student movement and everybody who stands behind them, that they were really requiring the government to resign and to have snap elections. So I don't know, do you know whether this was like celebrated also from the place of the student movement, or how is that perceived?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, there is understanding that this could be a massive opportunity, but this is also, of course, taking place in the context of a very unfair electoral environment. And I think everybody is expecting there to be the sort of usual tricks. And also, it's not only just the tilting of the playing field, it's also been an environment with a lot of intimidation, especially against opposition and activists, which we talked about. And you actually started off with our mini-series on the response to activism around the protests. So if you haven't listened to that, do check it out, because it just dropped this week. And that can give you a context of why I think there's still a little bit of nerves of, could there be some maybe like small scale security issues or clashes with protesters, police, even voters. I mean, there's just, I think, a lot of apprehension, but indeed also the feeling that this could be a massive opportunity for the opposition and for some of these new, political options to make headway.
Definitely. But yeah, as you said, the electoral environment is definitely something that is expected to be manipulated. I mean, we talk about the foreign interference, in many other contexts. Here we have definitely domestic actors, playing a big role in that. And of course, a lot of violence and tensions around the actual election days. And a lot of organizations are already looking into that. But, this is also developing in the time where we have seen another wave of intimidation towards, the activists, towards students themselves, but also towards those who kind of spoke against the government. Now, in the sense of you, Alexandra, definitely remember on 15th of March 2025, there was a peaceful, quiet, broad demonstration and protest happening in Belgrade, which was interrupted by sudden, wave of noise. So the fact that there were several thousand testimonies collected by the civil society in the country, evaluated as a sonic weapon, has been used. There were also these testimonies are submitted to the international level. There was an interim measure from the European Court of Human Rights to stop use of such a weapon, against peaceful protesters and so on. So, and there was an international attention as well to this event. And we are kind of coming back to it because on 19th of June, the High Prosecutor's Office started a new investigation in this matter. They found minutes from the students' movement's plenary sessions. So the students, when they come together, they try to decide in these plenum sessions, where they speak about what they're going to do, how they strategize, where they mentioned as well the potential use of the sonic weapon and how they can prepare for it. We joke about it a bit at my work and with the colleagues I work that it was really spinned in an Orwellian way, that the government is now accusing the students, those who spoke, that the sonic weapons used, and the NGOs who helped those, who felt actually the impact of the sonic weapon being used, of basically manipulating the general public and creating panic that this sonic weapon was used. And the prosecutor's office said that they will go after these people. They will try to investigate more. And this, of course, includes civil society organizations, but also a lot of people who spoke publicly. What happened to their health as a follow-up, as a result of this? They are very afraid of their appearances. So there is a lot of fear, and then there's a lot of time of intimidation. And then when I was in touch with civil society organizations, there was a lot of really expectation what's going to happen. And the raids already started with figures, who were speaking about the use of the sonic weapon. And the NGO sector is kind of calling for the UN independent investigation, saying that only an UN independent body can settle this for once and all, whether the sonic weapon was used or not. And it's quite interesting because this came quite a few days actually before Aleksandar Vučić was announcing this, and is always making me think whether this is somehow connected or what's the connection. But yeah, definitely very concerning. And that part of the activist part of Serbia, that we also try to bring into the deep dive these 2 weeks. And also that part of activist Serbia that I feel that didn't have a calm summer for, I said it already on the podcast, but for 3 years, definitely, because there were always some protests and some intimidation happening during summertime against the civil society.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what you said too. I think it's reasonable to claim that these things could be connected, right? I mean, this is a very common tactic of this government to basically manufacture crises, manufacture these kinds of campaigns, and then use that as an opportunity again to capitalize politically. And I think there's a very good chance that if the UN doesn't take this opportunity for an independent investigation, they will just try and sweep it under the rug with all of the election fanfare. Of course, there'll be a new government. There's speculation that the new government will be headed by Aleksandar Vučić in the prime minister role instead of president, right? So not only is it, unlikely that we're going to get a kind of, let's say, broader change in the political spectrum, it also is very possible we do see a sort of Russia-like, Medvedev scenario and Putin where they sort of bounce back and forth between. And yes, part of that, I'm sure, was spurred on maybe earlier than the ruling party would have liked, because now there's all this attention on, I think, the very real possibility that this weapon was used. So it's very worrying. I am glad, though, that we were able to speak to the two activists that we've spoken to. And as I said, that deep dive's already out. And next week, we'll be even able to focus on the topic more. So, we're not, let's say, removing the microscope. We're going to keep chipping away.
Definitely. And moving on to another part of, region that we covered that we might not cover so much. I don't know. You were here with Adam. last week, but I wonder if you can maybe brief us a bit on what is happening in Ukraine, because there have been some developments as always.
Yeah, I saw actually in the newsletter that Zelensky has announced that there's this 40-day pressure campaign, they're calling it, which is spearheaded by the State Security Office, or SBU. So we don't know a lot of the details about what this influence operation really looks like or what it really means, but the idea is that it's trying to force, Russia to the negotiation table, try and get the Kremlin to go back to the negotiations. This was reported by Kiev Independent, which we've had their director on in the past as well. So, look, this is coming on top of deeper and deeper strikes into Russia by Ukrainian forces, including the Moscow oil refinery being hit, which was, of course, a massive story. And I'm sure you saw those images, just like being engulfed in smoke. Yes. So there's a big concerted push here. I don't really know, we don't know a lot of what this really entails, but I can say I hope it's successful as far as, getting the negotiations kickstarted again. In theory, the U.S. has said now that they've, quote unquote, dealt with Iran, i.e. there seems to be movement towards a final deal there, maybe, with all the asterisks and everything. Maybe that will provide an opportunity again to get back to the table and work towards whatever this new peace, quote unquote, peace reality is going to be in Ukraine. But I don't know. I'm also apprehensive a bit about what that will look like. But let's see.
Yeah, I think we need to wait and see. And I mean, we said it so many times on this podcast that the negotiations maybe are not really leading anywhere. And let's just hope that maybe next time it will be very different. And I would like to, in that connection, also to mention that there will be a NATO Ankara summit that will be happening 6th to the 7th July. And I'm also mentioning it because it's a good time to kind of follow up on something that we have discussed as well in the deep dive of Czech Republic, where we mentioned with Pavel Havlicek, who was our guest, that there is an ongoing conflict between the Petr Pavel, the Czech president, who is former NATO general and very pro-Western, pro-Ukraine, and the Prime Minister Andrej Babiš and his kind of foreign affairs lead, who should attend this summit, as a representative of the Czech Republic. I mean, previously a practice was that the president would be attending such a summit, representing the country. This was something that was put in question by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And basically, it resulted to a situation that Petr Pavel, the president, was putting the government to the Constitutional Court with a question: who is constitutionally mandated to represent the country? The Constitutional Court didn't look into the merits of the case, like in detail, but the decision was that the president should be representing the country, which basically Andrej Babiš today, as we are recording, said that they will respect that. But there are already signs that we hear from other government officials saying that the president might not be mandated fully to represent the country. So there are still some nuances, but I mean, very interesting to see how this conflict between the government and the direction that the Czech government is having increasingly, unfortunately, which is, not so pro-Western, let's say, pro-EU, I think in their case rather, and not pro-Ukrainian, although still. And really the clear direction and the clear kind of focus of the president of the Czech Republic, how that's being, put into a conflict. And I mean, we just wait and see how that's going to end. It's just important to look and watch what is happening in the Czech Republic, because this is, again, not a thing that doesn't come in a vacuum. There were a lot of very concerning reforms, and we discussed them with Pavel. Most recently, also the human rights agenda is being kind of split across the governments, with nobody really clearly in charge, which is, of course, concerning. I mean, we often mention comparisons, in this podcast, and it's very difficult to do them. But I mean, of course, we don't see developments, such as in Hungary or Slovakia, but definitely something that is already a good time to wave some red flags when it comes to the Czech Republic, but also wait and see how that's going to develop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, if I may, I think there's also another country I want to bring into the conversation, which is Slovenia. Again, comparisons are tough, but I saw that they just celebrated their 35th statehood day, and there was some kind of, similar kind of standoff when the president took the stage as part of the celebrations, started to be booed by the crowd, and there was all this kind of, jockeying and encouragement by the new prime minister, Janez Janša, kind of encouraging this attitude of being, not only against the president, but sort of the larger value she stands for, pro-European, sort of similar bent. So kind of seeing maybe you could say an interesting and similar standoff in Slovenia. And I'm trying to, keep Slovenia as well in the headlines like you with Czechia, because it's easy to forget some of these smaller countries in our region, but there are also a lot of alarm bells there, a lot of announcements that they're going to do some massive cuts to NGO funding, to trade unions, and also go back to this kind of question of lowering judicial oversight, which was a huge problem under Janša's last term. So a lot of little worrying developments in terms of democratic backsliding in our region. And just because I think we all sort of still celebrating this fanfare of Hungary and, how do we come back from all of this? Sometimes we forget that there's quite a few alarm bells going off in other parts of our region.
Yeah. And, and I think what makes me think like Hungary was just so much into our face in a way.
Yes,
right?
Like
it was, it lasted, really, Orban was in power for 16 years, right? So, it started a long time ago. We kind of got accustomed to it. Some organizations, in the EU-wide rule of law report are looking at some, like countries from an angle of who are rule of law dismantlers, let's say.
Yeah.
And here you actually would find Slovakia, Croatia, to some extent Bulgaria, right? Then you have those countries who are not really progressing at all on rule of law issues, where you would find actually Czech Republic, Slovenia. So it's not really the scale, that we were used to in Hungary, which was so visible and like so openly challenging, anything almost that came from the EU. But it's in this it's in the details, I feel.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's in those small reforms that we really need to monitor and when we need to look into. But there is definitely a sign of democratic backsliding popping up, I think, across definitely the Central European region, within the region that we cover in the EU, let's say. So,
and maybe, I know we're getting to time, but we should maybe mention some positive news out of Hungary.
Go for it.
Why not? Just
continue
briefly.
Celebrating Hungary.
Yeah, I guess at least we have something to celebrate in this region. But maybe we'll remember, when was this now? Was it 2025 or 2024 when we first had the passage of the Sovereignty Protection Office?
I think it was 2024, but I'm also wouldn't be 100% sure, yeah.
It feels so long ago, so much has changed since then. But one of the last big pushes by Orban's outgoing government was to pass this Sovereignty Protection Office, which was basically yet another attempt to label independent media and civil society as foreign-backed agents. But this one was really concerning. There could have been, penalties, not just financial, but, possible criminal penalties on the table and all of this. But the good news is that this week, the Hungarian parliament voted to dissolve this office. And I think this will take effect in about 2 weeks' time, maybe a little bit more. So we're starting to slowly roll back some of these changes. And this is also good news in the context of the EU, because, of course, this was found to be legally dubious by the European Court of Justice, by the Commission. So this also is obviously helpful for Hungary's kind of role in the EU as well, which we've been also tracking closely. So some positive news, maybe to at least round out this week's news roundup.
Yeah, definitely. And for those of us who would like to hear more about Alexandra's exciting analysis and experience to be part of the World Cup, you can become our patrons and listen to the extended version of the news roundup for this week. But for those of us who are still not our patrons, I think this is where we're going to finish here. We're going to make it very crisp and sharp this week. And we're trying, right? And we will also maybe remind you, as we did several times during the news roundup, go back and check the deep dive that we have for this week. It's focusing on Serbia. It's telling the story from the beginning of the protest in 2024, November, through a story of an activist, Nikola Ristic, who was there at the very beginning. So I would really recommend that. Go and check it out. And we are looking forward to see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.